If photo ops and phony rhetoric actually got things done in this country, then Justin Trudeau would still be Prime Minister.
It's only been a day or two after the ministers' meeting, and we already got some problems. So on Tuesday, we had the first ministers' meeting, which we covered in the last video, and everyone seemed to be pretty pleased with the outcome of it. A bit of a love fest, as they've been reporting it. And even like we saw with Danielle Smith, she said she was encouraged with the rhetoric around pipelines and whatever Mark Carney was saying. However, one of the ministers that wasn't actually there was David Eby, and yesterday he put out a video addressing Danielle Smith and her talk about pipeline and immediately shut it down.
Don't support lifting the tanker ban, the oil tanker ban off the north coast of British Columbia. We have a massive taxpayer-owned pipeline in British Columbia. There is a significant and important discussion that needs to be had about maximizing the value from that pipeline. It's not my job to come in and tell Premier Ford that it's extremely unlikely that there will be a tunnel built under the 401. It's not my job to come in and tell Premier Smith that her vision for a North Coast pipeline is many, many years off, and there's no proponent.
Now, it's interesting that he also mentioned Doug Ford there, which I'll get to in a second. But this guy is a giant weasel. I can understand why so many people don't like David Eby. It's literally only been a day since the premiers met with the Prime Minister. They all said how positive it was, the nation-building projects that they discussed, getting Canada less reliant on the US and broadening our trading partners. And he's already shutting down the idea of a pipeline from Alberta to BC's coast, which would increase our market's reach. I mean, Korea, Thailand, China, Greece, even India, they're all interested in our oil and gas. And it's a shorter route from the BC side. So it actually increased the amount of revenue that we could be producing. But instead, he sounds very much like Guilbeault. They're all climate nuts. Him talking about we need to utilize the pipelines we have now when they're almost at full capacity. They like to say it's not, but there's already been reports saying it's like 75, 80, even 85% of the capacity is full. So why these guys keep going down this route, I don't understand. But like I mentioned, he targeted Doug Ford a little bit too. And Doug Ford is now getting some heat here in Ontario because Bill 5 just passed. And this is a bill to kind of fast track development projects. And he's getting a lot of pushback, especially from the NDP, the Liberals, and the First Nations.
MPP Sol Mamakwa made the point that he's simply a messenger on behalf of the First Nations, not threatening, but warning the Premier about possible blockades and road closures in protest to come.
Well, you can't break the law. Simple as that. If any of us go stand and block the highways, they need to move on or they'll be dealt with appropriately.
Now, I agree, if you break the law and you're blocking critical infrastructure, you should be arrested. But it's very interesting that he's taking this approach when he hasn't been this direct with any of the pro-Palestinian protesters who have blocked critical infrastructure, who have been outside of MPs' houses like Bill Blair, who, as I just reported a few videos ago, were blocking the Ontario food terminal. Like, there's tons of things that are happening here in our province that he hasn't been vocal about at all. But now that his fast track project might be blocked, he has some things to say. This is also why Doug Ford is a joke. But this is all being discussed with the backdrop of Donald Trump and the tariff situation, especially the 50% now on steel and aluminum. And this is where the House of Commons took place today, where Andrew Scheer and Mark Carney kind of went back and forth. And I don't think Mark Carney did that good of a job. So take a look.
Questions orales, oral questions. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Let's be clear, Trump's tariffs on Canada are wrong, unjustified, and attack on our workers and our economy. Now, while other countries have got deals to lower their tariffs, not only has the PM failed to do that, but he's got Canada's tariffs doubled on steel and aluminum. He promised he was the man with the plan. He can't even get a deal. Our workers are terrified about losing their jobs. And he promised that he'd collect $20 billion in retaliatory tariffs, but then secretly drop those tariffs to zero during the campaign. If he's so sure that he's still going to collect $20 billion, why not table a budget and prove it to Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the American tariffs, the new tariffs on steel and aluminum, are unlawful, unjustified, and illogical. I agree with the member. And that is why, one of the reasons why we have retaliatory tariffs on over $90 billion worth of U.S. goods. We are in intensive negotiations with the Americans and in parallel preparing reprisals if those negotiations do not succeed.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Now, I don't know if Carney just thinks that we're all stupid and don't remember that the report came out last month, but, you know, we had it in May come out saying Canada's tariffs on the U.S. dropped nearly to zero with some exemptions because back in April they had removed most of them. But this report came out 2 days ago saying that 58% of targeted U.S. imports exempt from Canada's retaliatory tariffs. And when you get into it, it says almost 60% of the imports from the U.S. hit by Canadian counter levies are now eligible for relief, representing a significant dilution of Canada's tariff response. Oxford Economics estimated almost 60% of the U.S. imports which are subject to retaliatory tariffs could be eligible for temporary relief from $96 billion in duties, which many economists had warned would lead to rising inflation and slowing economic growth. So here he is in the House talking about we have this targeted over $90 billion of targeted tariffs, but in the report says it's all eligible for relief. So where is our strength here? Where is our levy against the U.S. where you're hitting them with them, but then you're going to just relieve them of it? And this is what Andrew Scheer brings up, talking about us having some strength in this negotiation.
Well, one way to deal with the Americans is from a position of strength. But now the Prime Minister is saying that he won't even approve a new pipeline unless there is consensus. This is already unraveling. The radical BC Premier says no pipeline through his province. And there's not even consensus in the Liberal cabinet, with top ministers committed to killing oil and gas projects. The vast majority of Canadians don't want to give a veto to politicians. They want to be less dependent on the Americans and to earn more powerful paychecks from selling our oil and gas around the world. Will the Prime Minister show some leadership and commit to approving a pipeline today?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians from Shawinigan to Saskatoon and the premiers and Prime Minister that represent them have agreed on the importance of building projects of national interest. The consensus that's required includes a consensus with Indigenous peoples, something that the members opposite do not want. We will stand with Indigenous Canadians. We will build pipelines, energy infrastructure in the future of this great country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So I gotta say, at this point, I feel like nothing is actually going to get built in our country because it sounds like it all falls down onto what the Indigenous people say. When the Liberals have been talking about one project, one review, who's the person that's doing the final review? Is it the government or is it the Indigenous people? Because Mark Carney here saying that nothing will be done unless the consensus from the Indigenous also is involved. Is it all up to them? Do we have some other avenue that we can do this? I'm not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel is what I'm saying. And I feel like Andrew Scheer kind of brings us up by mentioning this drama teacher vibe that we're getting with this reconciliation focus, it seems like. But, you know, then he pivots into other things that are affecting Canadians, like the price of groceries right now. And Mark Carney's only response is, you guys are getting a $35 tax relief. Like, what are you complaining about?
If photo ops and phony rhetoric actually got things done in this country, then Justin Trudeau would still be Prime Minister. But In all seriousness, the Liberals' $500 billion in new spending without a budget will make inflation worse. The PM said that he wants to be judged by prices at the grocery store. So let's look at those prices. The verdict is in. Beef up 34%, apples up 18%, coffee up 9%. Will the Prime Minister listen to Parliament and table a budget that controls spending, lowers taxes, and cuts inflation so Canadians can afford to put food on the table?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased for the first time to hear the members opposite talk about lowering taxes.
That's right.
In front of this House. First time in my hearing, Mr. Speaker, before the House is a tax cut for 22 million Canadians up to $840. They want their support.
Yeah, this is the very first time the Conservatives are talking about a tax relief for Canadians in the House of Commons. What is this guy even saying at this point? This must be just like a quick little game for him. I don't know. He gets a joy out of this. He says he's not a politician, but then he's putting on these weird little acts. I don't get what's really going on in the House of Commons right now. And even the CBC, David Cochrane, he's talking about how Carney started off with elbows up and dollar for dollar retaliations. But at this point, what's going on? But even after the Conservative and the NDP answer the question, he's still there to defend Carney. I just don't get it.
Ginny, I mean, it was dollar for dollar, and it was elbows up in the campaign until around, I don't know, the last 2 weeks, April 15th, when the remission came in on some of the dollar for dollar tariffs because of the unintended knock-on consequences in the Canadian economy. What do you make of the pause now, waiting to see if negotiation and conversation can bear fruit before hitting back?
Yeah, I think on retaliation, I'm for a pause. They're in the middle of a negotiation to take a rash action for public sort of gain that might impede your negotiation, especially if you're making progress, is foolish. So I think that's fair. I think that's good. There are a couple things that the government should have done, though, and I don't get why they're waiting. Catherine Cobden from the Steel Association was on the program earlier, or on the network earlier, and she was making the point that we still let China and other countries dump steel into our country, and we don't tariff them at the border. That's insane to me. If we're in the midst of negotiating Canada-US, and we're trying to keep Fortress North America, or whatever you want to call it, we've got to tariff the unfair traders to make an argument for fair and free trade. So I think that's one thing. And the second thing is what you said, David, like the guy didn't run on this. He ran on a really aggressive, elbows up argument up against a much more nuanced argument that Poilievre made, more akin to what we're seeing play out today. And so, again, I don't want to harp on the hypocrisy. I like the approach the Prime Minister is taking. I think it's good, but it's not what he ran on.
Okay. Jordan, is it hypocrisy? Is it evolution? You know, how do you view it, or is it just the right thing to do? I mean, how do you view it?
Well, I guess we'll wait and see, right?
Yeah.
It sort of depends on the results, because it's true that Carney ran on a way more robust approach to the U.S. tariffs than what we're seeing from him, particularly over the last 2 weeks. And the reality is that there's been really no change in the tariffs that are impacting Canadian industries. They're still in place. And I think what I would note today is the alarm that we're hearing from steel communities, from labor leaders, from industry leaders. You know, we're talking about thousands of job losses. We're talking about potentially really the end of that export industry here if these are allowed to stand. So while I understand, obviously, if negotiations are ongoing, that might impact how Canada reacts. These tariffs have been foreshadowed since the weekend. So that's about 4 days to formulate a plan and to understand how Canada would react. And so I think that really what the Prime Minister has here is a serious communications problem, because he signaled to Canadians during the campaign that he was going to behave one way in the face of these tariff threats. And now that he's here, he's behaving a different way. And I think that the people who are going to be impacted by this are rightly wondering about that gap.
Is the different behavior justified by the fact that they had the Oval Office meeting and now they're in negotiations?
There's been no change. There's been no change in the tariff. So no, right. I think the results are going to be what justifies that, but to date there haven't been any.
Right.
And that's a fact. I'm very glad that Jordan pushed back, saying like, no, you can't use that as an excuse. I mean, Cochrane's trying to say, well, is it hypocrisy or is it evolution? He's just adapting to the new environment. And she's saying, no, there's been no change since the negotiation. The tariffs are still implemented, and now they've doubled, essentially. And so you can't say that this is not hypocrisy and that is adapting to it. It's plain and simple. Carney's ran one way, and now he's doing things the complete opposite. And this is actually something that Dan Mateague, a former liberal, brought up when he was talking about how the liberals are going to cause a lot of problems this year, and he's going to have to be on his toes. We all are.
My work is cut out for me. I think the government's going to try to find ways to mollycoddle its old, green organizations and climate groups that are backing net zero at the same time. They're going to try to play this game of we can suck and blow at the same time, as they say.
I was going to say that's sucking and blowing at the same time, and governments try to do that, but not too often successfully. So
unless you have an effete press,
you pay the press and you keep Canadians in the dark.
And keeping Canadians in the dark is their specialty. They got the media on their side. They can show you what they want to show you what they don't want you to see. And that's it. Sucking and blowing at the same time. But with all that being said, let me know what you guys think about all this. If you can, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And as always, I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.